Welcome back to the channel. My name's Adam Smith, and inside this game overview and gameplay video, I'm checking out Valheim, the board game coming from Mood Publishing. This one's landing on GameFound in the very near future for October 1st. If you want to find the campaign page, I'll have a link to it in the pinned comment, video description, and on screen in the top right-hand corner. The purpose of this video, as always, is to show you how the game flows and operates, but first, as I've already got the game set up for the very first scenario, of which there are a number inside of this prototype, but we are starting with the first. I'll go over all the game components first to give you an idea as to what is everything here in front of you, and then we'll dive right into gameplay, and I'll show you a handful of rounds of play as well as focus on some key aspects of gameplay that you likely want to know. Valheim is a 1 to 4 player cooperative board game, and it can be played true solo, in which survival depends on teamwork and strategy. You'll be gathering your fellow companions and venturing forward to explore, build, collect resources, forge weapons, equip sturdy armor, battle enemies, and carve your path towards facing the ultimate evil. Your objective is to summon and defeat the Forsaken, but you will first need to prepare before facing that challenge. To get ready, you'll need to gather materials and craft gear, upgrade your house, and defend yourself against creatures while doing so. Every session of Valheim is featured around a unique scenario. Each scenario features a map layout, story introduction, objectives, and a few guidelines. To summon the Forsaken and progress to the endgame, you will need to complete the objective. If you fail to do so before time runs out, you lose. What's great about the prototype, from what I can see, is that it is broken into individual scenarios. You can enjoy them as one shot, or you can actually go into the campaign mode where you have things crossing over from scenario to scenario. And of course, the earlier scenarios, of which you'll see the very first one here, is on the easier side of the spectrum, and it gets progressively more difficult as you go through each of them. So let's start with a component overview, and I'll take you around the game board to show you all the different components that are set up for this very first scenario play. Let's start things off by talking about the play area. So you'll see the square board in the center, which is all depicting water. So that is going to be placed underneath. Your hex tiles for your scenario will be placed on top. And of course, depending on which scenario you're playing, the layout will be completely different, and it's randomized based on different environment types, which you can see in the back of the hex tiles. There's even more environment types than what I'm showing you here, like winter locations and other regions, etc. You have your character. If you're playing true solo like I am, you'll place it in the home tile, which is the only one which will be face up. And your scenario might have a couple tokens placed on top of these hexes, which I've got 2 up there. We'll talk more about those later on. On the left and right hand sides of the play area, you're going to have some other modular tiles, which will make up more space for components to be placed. We have the boss tile here is the very first one. You'll see puzzle piece connections here, and it actually hugs the bottom of the board as well to keep it all snug up against the side, which I really like. These are boss boards. They're double-sided. You'll flip them over depending on which boss you're playing, and there's multiples of them, because depending on the scenario you're playing, there's a certain Forsaken tied to it. Then you have the boss altars in the center here, the cards specific to the Forsaken you're going up against right there. We'll talk about the token a little later on. We have the creature deck up there. That's the creature board, which is the final one up top. On the left-hand side of the board, we have a number of commonly used components. We have tombstone tokens. These are on standees. We have fire tokens, bomb tokens, frost, and poison conditions. We have some meads here. Health is obviously red, stamina is yellow, and antidote is green, so you can actually craft these and consume them. And these are reroll tokens. Here are the dice for the game. Worth mentioning that you can't roll beyond the amount of physical dice included in the game. Now, the black dice here are rolled for the enemies against the players, so you'll be checking those out to see what kind of damage is coming at you, or maybe special effects. For the player fighting back, you're going to be using either yellow dice or red dice, or some type of mixture in between. Yellow are the weaker, red are the stronger. The blue dice are defensive dice the player will use to try to block some of the damage coming from the black dice, and the green one has to do with gathering resources. Here we have the character dashboard. I've already selected mine. There are 3 others to choose from. You'll also note in the top right-hand corner, there is a spirit animal. In my case, I've chosen Spirit of the Wolf, which is yellow, and that ties to the yellow base on my miniature. Depending on which scenario you're setting up for, your dashboard might look different. You might have more going on, but I'm starting in scenario number 1, so things are pretty bare bones. I've got health at maximum. My stamina is halfway. I also have 2 upgrades. One is considered a small, one is a large. These are done at random. There's decks of them, so you'll basically shuffle them and draw one at random and place them here. The top section is what you're trying to achieve, and when you do, then you go ahead and place this white cube in here to denote that this passive is now on all the time. You get some kind of a benefit on the bottom. Over here, the larger upgrade is going to take a lot more blocking of at least 2 damage in order to unlock that one. In the bottom right-hand corner of the dashboard, you'll see a Power of Odin. This is also random. There's a number of these tiles to pick from at random, so I got mine. It is a revealing of a tile. I have to spend 3 stamina. These are the icons for stamina and health right here. Now, I just mentioned that the small upgrade, large upgrade, and power vote all came at random. The two here came from these decks respectively, again, based on the diamond shapes that match. And then these tiles up here were randomly piled up, and I pulled one at random to select my power vote down here. But there's lots of different variation there from the start of a scenario. On the right-hand side of the play area, you'll see an area for cooking. As we choose to cook, we'll draw a card and show it face up in one of those two face-down positions that are watermarked. We also have our house. Essentially, as you craft furniture and place those standees inside of your home, they'll sit face up, and they'll also have an icon on them to remind you what they do and any benefits they might provide when you choose to end your turn in your house. Now, just below the house, you'll see a little stone area here. This is where you can place resources that you've acquired and you've placed in your home. So you can either carry the resources on your person or you can put them in your home. There's pros and cons to both. Of course, if you carry them on your person and you're playing on the hard mode side of the equation for difficulty, if you get killed out in the wild, your resources are going to be in trouble. Whereas, if you actually had them at your house, they're a bit safer, but raids can happen on your home as well. So, with a survival game, nothing's really ever truly safe. Next, we have a couple decks that are tied to equipment crafting. So we have the weapon equipment deck, we have the armor equipment deck. You can go through these decks to determine what you could potentially craft. And of course, as I gather resources through some gameplay, you'll see how that works out. We also have the Haldor deck, which allows you to go after rare craftable items, which is pretty cool. And then over here, we have a number of game components that are resource-based. I placed them in game trays. The game trays are not part of the prototype in any way, shape, or form. So we have things like fur, bronze, silver, wood, resin, gold, all kinds of things, rock, and then we have all of our furniture sitting in here. These will be standees once we've actually crafted them. Next, I've laid out the basic tools, and these tools are going to open up doors to allow you to go after other resources. So, of course, you have things like the hammer, flint axe, big spoon, pickaxe, and flint knife. These things all tie to what is most obvious. So, in the bottom right-hand corner, the flint knife goes to the fur. You have the pickaxe, which is going to help you gather minerals. You have the big spoon, which will help with the cauldron situation, which is going to tie back to cooking. The flint axe here is going to tie to gathering wood, and the hammer is going to allow you to start building things. And last but not least, for the components, just want to show you some of the different prototype enemies that we've got here. Of course, some of them are going to pertain to Forsaken bosses, so unless it pertains to your scenario, you won't have them. But there's going to be other kind of small to large scale enemies, which you will see crop up as you explore through the world. Final thing I wanted to show you is the reference cards that came as part of the prototype. Really hope to see these in the final version as well. So you got a dice overview, resource overview, the mead overview, the tokens, the merchant, all of it right there at your fingertips. And of course, you need the furniture one as well. This furniture one is on the back of the dice overview. So you only need one of these in the end in order to have everything. So again, just to level set the resources across the game, we have hide, coin, resin, wood, bronze, iron, silver, and rock are all considered minerals. We're now ready to head into gameplay. I've got scenario number 1 right here, King of the Stags, and we've got the narrative text I'll read in a second, the objective, early resources, special rules, event deck. Some of these things I've already covered, but we'll touch on them in just a moment. If you want to see how things are laid out in the prototype rulebook, this is how it shows you how to set up your scenario. And as you go through the multiple scenarios, things start getting progressively more difficult, and the actual scenario layouts become more varied and interesting with different types of environments, and that continues on throughout the entirety of the rulebook as it continues down. Now again, this is not a final representation of that rulebook, but you can see things just continue to progress in terms of what's going on in these scenarios. Within the prototype rulebook, there are currently 14 scenarios total, but without further ado, let's dive into scenario number 1. Better known as King of the Stags, his antlers are branches of iron. They crack the rocks and bring down mountains. His hooves are the sound of thunder. His voice a howling gale. You've arrived in Valheim carrying only simple clothes and the material to construct your first home. After lighting the fire and getting some heat into your bones, you consider your first task to prove your worth to the gods. Seek out and defeat Eikthyr, the huge creature that dominates these lands. Eikthyr, an abnormally large stag with iron chains wrapped around its electrified red antlers, must be summoned in order for you to fight him. First, you must hunt the 2 biggest stags on the island. You must then bring their antlers as trophies to Eikthyrs altar in order to summon him. The objective of this scenario is to collect the 2 stag trophies, bring them back to the altar in the meadows, of which we don't know which meadows has the altar just yet, but we'll be searching around to find it, and then we can spend an action to summon and hopefully defeat the Forsaken boss. The scenario tells us to place early resources, and when I'm playing true solo with just one character, even though it mentions 4 early resources, I'm only placing the very first one because it's tied to the number of characters in play. If I was controlling 4 actual characters, I get all 4 resources in a pile as written on top of the event deck. The purpose of it is essentially basically kind of giving you a little bit of time to gather some things before the event deck starts throwing wrenches at you. Not all of them are going to be bad, but a good chunk of them will be. Now, there is a special rule around these 2 stag trophies, which are out on the game board we talked about before. They're sitting in meadow tiles. Once we choose to explore the tile with a token and flip it over, we place the trophy on an empty space. In order to collect the trophy, though, we have to go there and successfully collect it like when hunting a deer. We'll talk more about this later on, but essentially, we also have to roll a double result in order to succeed against these prime stags. Single results do not count in trying to hunt these. And unlike other scenarios that might use this token where you actually, when you take it down and get yourself a hide, you're not going to get a hide in this scenario. It's just going to be a trophy token. The game structure is straightforward. We're going to go ahead and take a player turn because I'm playing true solo with one character. It comprises of 3 actions during my turn. We'll talk about the actions we can take in just a moment. After that is done, we go to the event deck. And in this case, because there's a wood on it, I get to gain that resource. But the next time I end my character turn after that, then I go to the event deck. I'm going to have to draw a card. It goes back and forth between the character turn and the event deck until the game ends. We know how to win the game based on us focusing on the objectives of trying to get to that final battle with the Forsaken, but if we get to that final arena battle and we end up getting knocked out, then we lose. The other way we can lose while we're actually just trying to get prepared for that battle is if we can no longer draw a card from the event deck because it is run out, then we also lose. So as I start my very first turn, I can take 3 actions, and again, worth mentioning, there are a number of actions to take. I'm not going to go over every single one of them up front. We'll talk about the ones that I actually do as we do them, and then I'll cover the ones I haven't done a little bit later on. So there are ones you can only do when you're at your house, which is the tile I'm currently standing on. There's other actions you can do, but you have to be out in the game world to do them. And then there's free actions. Of course, they don't actually count against the action allotment of 3. As I start off inside my house, might as well talk about the options that I have in the house. So first off, I could cook food. I could potentially eat prepared food if I have actually cooked something. I can craft a weapon or furniture. I can ignite a weapon. I can brew mead. I can fabricate a bomb, or I can summon Haldor. There are a number of things I can do, but some of them have constraints. In other words, you have to have certain things built first or done first to be able to do them. You can always cook food as an action. You can draw 1 card from the top of the food deck and place it in the very first slot. This is now considered prepared food. As a second action, I can choose to consume it. If I do, I take advantage of only the top section of the card, which states honey, and you'll see some icons across the top there. Might be tough to see from distance, so I'll bring it up close in a little bit. But the red one relates to health, so I get a health increase of 1, and the 2 yellow icons up there are for stamina. So the stamina I'm not full on, so I could actually consume this. And it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to consume prepared food. I've chosen to take a second action and consume it, and when I do, not only do I gain the icons across the top of the card only, I also gain a reroll token, which is another advantage to eating prepared food. Now, if we eventually craft the table, then when we actually do a cook action, instead of drawing 1 card off the top, we draw 2 cards. So our cooking would essentially become more productive. And then also, if we happen to have the cauldron, you can take advantage of the bottom half of the card, which is the better side. Here's an up-close look at the card I just consumed. So honey there at the top. I get 1 health increase and 2 stamina. Again, the health's not going to help me because I'm at the very top. But stamina I will definitely bump up right now. But if I had had the cauldron, I could have taken advantage, and the cauldron symbol's right there, of the honey roasted nuts and fruits, which gives me way more stamina back. So my stamina down here is going to bump up by 2, and the reroll token is going to show up in my inventory. That wraps up my second action. Third action, I'm going to choose to cook yet again to get some food prepared for a future feast. And I got myself off the top of the deck deer meat. This one will help me with health 2 and stamina 1. Now going to our very first event phase, we have that early resource sitting on the event deck, so instead of drawing a card, we simply just take the wood and place it on our character. I could choose as a free action right now to even place it in my house if I wanted to. You can use resources that are either on your person or in your house when you're sitting on the house tile, but of course once you leave the house, then you can only actually use resources that are currently on you. Now on to the next player turn. We've got 3 actions to spend. We've got 3 adjacent tiles to our home, so we can explore any one of these that we want. I'm going to choose to explore the one closest to us there in the south. We're going to go ahead and pick that tile, flip it face up, and see what we find. When you first explore a tile, you'll notice there's white lines breaking these into different spaces, and inside those spaces there might be absolutely nothing, like the space on the far right, or there might be something to the north. We have some deer, it appears, and we can actually go hunting to try to gather some fur if we actually have the right tools to do so, which we currently don't. We're going to have to craft them to make it happen, but the rock down there we can definitely go after. Now, some of these areas we explore might actually have a creature icon on it, and if you do have one, you check the creature deck, which is up in the top left-hand corner where we set it up earlier, and if you see the matching symbol, you just grab that reference card to find out what enemy is there, place a standee. We don't currently have any enemies, so that's good news. Also, you could potentially find chests that you can actually open up, and of course, that'll provide some nice benefits. There are two types of treasure chests in the game. You can find common ones or rare ones, so keep an eye on the icons to make sure you know which one to place. Now, taking a look at the different things we could potentially craft, because we don't currently have any of these available yet. We haven't made any, but we can see the requirements in the bottom left-hand corner, and we're going to need some rock in order to create flint knives or flint axes, which is going to open up the ability to go after fur and wood. So we certainly want to gather that rock. We're not going to go ahead and move down to that rock area. It's worth mentioning that you can move up to 2 spaces. You don't have to use the full allotment, and at times you'll only be able to use one anyway, because you might want to take another action that will then cut off your movement action. So in other words, you can't take the 2 points of movement and split them up and put an action in between. Movement in the game is not always going to be this easy. You're going to have spaces that have a minus move symbol in them, or minus stamina, or minus health. You can even have plus health situations. So you can find places where you can actually revive yourself a little bit. But essentially, you'll see those icons right on the spaces as you traverse through them, making it really easy to adjust things as you're playing along. So essentially, as you explore deeper into the game and get into different types of environments, you'll see harsher terrain. My third action is going to be collecting resources. We know it's going to be rock, and we also know exactly which die to roll because it's right on the tile itself. Very handy. So we're going to grab the green resource die. We're going to roll it, and however many hands we get is how many of that type of resource we gain. Now, the cool thing about the resource die is it has a bunch of hand symbols, but it also has an exclamation point, and if you happen to roll that as you're gathering things, you actually attract the attention of nearby creatures. You move any adjacent creatures onto your space. Being in a space with any creatures will automatically start combat. We'll talk more about combat later on, but essentially combat is not an action. Essentially, it happens automatically when you move into a space with an enemy, or an enemy moves into a space with you. The green die has a bunch of double hand symbols, single hand symbols, and some of them actually have the exclamation point in them as well, which is not good, of course, but it wouldn't be bad in this case because we don't have any enemies anyway, so we're hoping for a double hand result here. We got ourselves a single hand, so we'll take 1 rock. Now, something you all might be wondering at this point is, can you just use the same action multiple times within your turn? Yes, you absolutely can. There's no limitation on that. You can take action so long as you meet the criteria of the action, but you could essentially sit here and gather like crazy. Remember, again, the game has a timed element to it, so you don't want to just sit there gathering resources forever, not actually accomplishing anything, because you will not win the scenario. We now go to the event poll, and we got ourselves the Greylings Emerge. It says repopulate all revealed creature spaces. If none have been revealed yet, add a creature to any vacant space. This could be really bad if you've explored a whole bunch inside the game. Now, it actually goes back to something I have on my character, which is unique to my character, which I probably should think about using at some point, and that's my Odin power. So the event this time did not hurt us, which is good news. Also worth noting, I have a reroll token. So for instance, if I really didn't like that gather roll, I could burn the reroll token to reroll the die. You might want to keep that for defensive or combat purposes, but it's totally up to you. At maximum, you can have up to 2 reroll tokens in your inventory. Now, what I wanted to touch on with the Odin power is down here. You can see if I spend 3 stamina, I can reveal any tile in the scenario. So very cool thematically that I have that power. As a ranger, I can reveal any tile, but the downside again being that certain events are going to throw wrenches at you. In this case, if I had a whole bunch of creature icons everywhere, I'd have a lot of creatures cropping up. We now go into our brand new character turn. I want to continue gathering resources. I'm going to roll the resource die here and see what we get. We got ourselves 2 with the exclamation mark. Great timing, because that's not going to hurt us at all because there's no creatures in play. So that's awesome. We got a bunch of rock resources. We have some wood. And one more thing to mention about collecting resources that we just did. If there are no adjacent enemies, when you get that exclamation symbol as we just did on the die, then you actually look 2 spaces away, and monsters from 2 spaces away will move 1 space closer. So they can essentially hear within a radius that you're trying to gather resources, whether it be rock, wood, whatever. Thematically makes a lot of sense, especially if you played the video game. To be honest, while we don't have any enemies to deal with, let's go ahead and gather more rock. Maybe one more time. We'll use our second action to gather some more and see how well we do. Got ourselves 2 more, which is awesome. And at this point, we use 2 movement to move back to our house, because when you're at your house, that's where you can craft weapons or furniture. That ends up consuming our 3 actions. We pull an event card, and all is quiet for now. As we start a brand new turn, I certainly want to craft some more tools to be able to gather different types of resources. So every time you craft a weapon or furniture, that's going to burn up one of your actions. So we'll go ahead and spend an action to spend a rock to create the flint knife. This is also going to provide us a base yellow dye for combat, which is nice and allows us to go after fur. Awesome. And then we're going to also go ahead and create the flint axe as well so we can go after wood. Now, something that wasn't defined in the prototype rules, but certainly will be likely during the campaign, is the exchanging of items that you're carrying on you versus what's actually equipped on your character on their dashboards. In other words, what's in your backpack versus what is in these 3 slots right here. Now, my understanding is as soon as we go ahead and craft these things, one of them will sit in the furthest left position. The one in the middle is going to be your shield for defenses, which is going to tie to your blue dice. And then this one here on the far right can be your armor. And of course, it can be in any order you want because none of them are defined specifically, but in the final version, they likely will be. Now, there isn't a free action or any action that talks about exchanging things in and out of your hands, so that will have to be detailed during the campaign. But the premise here between these 2 I've just crafted is the die is exactly the same, so in this case, no issue as to which one I'm currently carrying. And of course, regardless, I have access to go after wood or fur. I've got one more action to spend. Now, there's a bunch of free actions you can take on your turn. You can drink mead, you can throw a bomb, you can dismantle equipment that you've created. So in other words, if you don't need anymore, you can toss it back in order to gain the resource that's in the bottom left-hand corner to use for other things. You can use your power of Odin skills. We talked about that before. We can use an effect on skills and equipment specifically. You can open a chest. Those are all the things you can do for free. So right now I'm going to use my power of Odin skill to reveal any tile. It'll cost me 3 stamina. And it appears we found something very useful indeed. We have a very clear space on the north section of that tile. We also have some fur, some deer, again, kind of clumped up in that area. There's a lot of deer to the west. And then right beside us, we have some rock, but you'll notice there's an icon for the first time showing up. And that creature icon is very specific to the creature card it pertains to in the creature deck, which we prepared at the top left-hand corner of the game board. So we now go to that deck to find the exact icon that's shown in that area, and that is the enemy in that space. So we found our very first enemy of the game. We have a grayling. This is going to come at us with a black die in the top right-hand corner. Its health is down the bottom right. It's 1, and it will provide us a resin if we take it out. Now, what would be really cool is I have one final action left to spend. If I actually had a ranged weapon right now, I would be within range 1 to make an attack from my home to that grayling to take it down, but I don't have a ranged weapon yet, so I can't do that. So now let's ponder about what we can do inside of our home here. Seeing as we can craft items, we should check out the weapon blueprints to see what we can potentially craft. We can also check out the armor blueprints if we wish, and we can go through all of these to see what the requirements are. And of course, we're not close to much of them because we haven't explored too deep into the game yet. Again, these are just the prototype ones available currently. So taking a look through, let's see if we got anything we could do. We could pull off the club here. The club will give us a yellow die, and also if we wanted to expend some stamina, we could get 2 yellow dice on that swing. So really start chucking some dice. Not bad, but again, that's just melee only, no ranged. Coming on down here, oh, there's a nice bow, but that's going to require some things we currently don't have yet. We can go after the spear, so we could create the spear. This one actually is ranged, so we're able to attack a space 1 away, but we only get a single yellow die, so it's pretty good, but not great. Or we could spend a wood here to get this crude bow, and this actually gives us a yellow die. We can expend a stamina to get 2 dice. It is ranged, but it is double-handed, so if you're holding the crude bow, you're not able to have a shield. So for my final action, I'm going to choose to craft that spear. I was really tempted by the bow, to be completely honest, because then I can start leveraging stamina. But this one, even though it's only a single yellow die, which is exactly the same as what I already had with my knife or my axe for attacks, it does allow me to attack from distance, as you can see the ranged icon on the bottom right. So that allows me to kind of get a first attack in. And of course, if I don't kill the thing, it'll just come in at me. Now I have plans to do even more with crafting, but just before we do, we have a thunderstorm coming in. It says wildlife stays hidden from the rough weather. No deer hunting possible the next turn. So all that wonderful deer off to the west of us, we cannot go after. As we start our next turn, we take a look at all the armors we could potentially craft, because seeing as I actually have a one-handed weapon, I could potentially see if I could pull off crafting something for defense, because, well, if we have enemies out there, we probably want to avoid damage coming back at us. We don't always have to do that, but that's the balance, is whether we want to or not, or spend it on something else. Now, this wood shield could be good, but I need 2 wood, so it doesn't look like across any of this I can really make something defensively at the moment. Now, one point of clarity around combat, as I mentioned earlier, that combat initiates automatically. That's when it's melee-based. When it's ranged-based, it is going to burn an action because you're initiating it from distance, and of course, the enemy is going to react to that attack and come into your space if you don't kill it. So if you have a really, really high health enemy and you poke it from distance, it's coming at you. But the grayling is just 1 health, so I'm going to use an action to throw a ranged attack at this grayling using my spear. We'll see how we do. We got the hit we need. That grayling is gone. And the advantage, again, to ranged attacks is that you're not rolling the black die at the same time as you're making that first attack. That is the advantage, because there's no chance for the enemy on that first attack to hit you, so that is the plus. So if you take it out like that, it's a clean kill. Now, when the loot drops, it drops in the space that it's in. The prototype rules don't specify at this time whether you just gain the loot automatically, but thematically it would make sense if you had to walk through the space, so that's how I'm choosing to play it. So second action will be a move. We get up to 2 movement. My first one is to walk into the space, and we'll pick up that resin. And I would have loved to use a point of movement to get into that deer space to try and get some fur, but unfortunately the deer are all scared off because of the thunderstorm. So my third and final action will be to explore the tile as we head deeper into the forest. Now this tile is very cool. We have a number of things going on here. We have 2 skeleton enemies that need to show up. We have a chest in that same space. We also have the ability to go after wood and gather it up north. So 2 skeletons have shown up. Also, a chest is showing up here, and based on the icon, it is a common chest. You'll see the rare chest right beside it. Here's the enemy's reference card for the skeleton. It's a little bit tougher now. 2 health to take these ones down, and on top of it, it's rolling 2 black dice, and if it gets an exclamation mark for every one, it's going to get some defense to block against our attacks. And it's worth mentioning that the chest sitting in the same space as the enemies cannot be picked up or interacted with until all the enemies are clear out of that space. We could go to the right and go right past the skeletons, but as you remember, if we start collecting resources or doing something else in that capacity, it's going to draw their attention. That's the end of my 3 actions. The event card that comes out is called Hunt Opportunity. It says if you are outside, you spot a single deer stag grazing nearby. You can sneak up on it and try to put it down. If you want, you pay a stamina to roll a green die for fur. I would 100% try and pull this off right now, but the downside is the event card that's currently in play says Thunderstorm. It says wildlife stays hidden from the rough weather. No deer hunting possible till the next turn. So thematically, my understanding, even though it may not be specified inside of the prototype rules, is that the event card takes precedence and no deer hunting possible outcome can happen. And that makes sense to not be able to take advantage of, as the prior Thunderstorm event card says you cannot hunt deer until your next turn, and we currently weren't at our next turn, we were at an event phase. So now with 3 actions, I'm going to go ahead and make a ranged attack at one of the skeletons. So let's roll our yellow die and see how we do. Again, we're going to need 2 damage to take out a skeleton, so it's unlikely we can pull this off, but we do have the availability on this die to see a double result on one side. So a 1 in 6 chance. Let's see how we do. We got a single hit. And my understanding is when you make a ranged attack into an adjacent space and you don't kill the enemy there, then any other enemies in that space, including the one you targeted, are going to be coming in at you. So as combat initiates, there's 2 things to keep in mind. While you have more enemies than you do characters in the space, you are considered outnumbered. And when you're considered outnumbered during an attack, if the enemy lands a hit against you, in other words, you don't have any defenses and it actually lands a hit icon, then you're going to take an extra point of damage every single time you take an attack when you're outnumbered. So you want to get those numbers back to being even as quick as possible. The next thing to mention is the fact you're taking on 2 creatures in the same space, but you're not actually fighting both creatures at the same time. So you're still rolling 2 black dice for one of the skeletons attacking you. Once you've gone through that first skeleton, you can then go to the next skeleton. If you have varying types in the same space, the strongest is the one you go after first. So I've got 2 black dice coming my way for a skeleton attacking me, and I'm rolling my 1 yellow die all at the same time. So now we're going to start taking some damage at the same time as the attacks are coming at us. Let's see how we do. Oh, this is not good. We got a blank result, an exclamation mark, and 2 hits. Now when resolving dice, we always start with the player dice first, but we still have to resolve the enemy dice, even if our player dice take out the enemy. Now you might think it's a good time to use a reroll token in order to try to reroll that yellow die to get a hit, but here's the kink. The fact that the skeleton got the exclamation mark means they have defense of 1, which means they're going to block a hit against them. So whatever I get on this roll, unless it was a double hit, that's the only way I'm going to be able to take out a single skeleton, so it's just not worth burning the reroll token right now. So as you can tell, not having defenses on my side of the equation in terms of crafting something like a shield is certainly hurting me. We're going to have to get back there and focus on that in the near future. But for now, taking 2 damage plus 1. So we're taking a total of 3 damage because we are outnumbered. And combat continues to go on until one side is left standing, which is scaring me because we really need to get that extra skeleton out of here so they don't get that extra damage bonus for outnumbering me. So we did pretty decent here. We got our 1 hit, which will take out one of the skeletons. I'm happy with that. The skeletons are going to hit me back for 1 and also an additional 1 because I'm currently outnumbered. Now the skeletons don't drop anything for us, of course, because they're just skeletons, bones. They don't really have much going on in terms of storage capacity. But at this point in time, we need to continue the fight, but we are dangerously close to being knocked out. We need just 2 more hits against us and we're gone. So this is a bit sketchy. Let's continue our battle here. We are 2 hits away from being knocked out. The skeleton needs 2 hits against it, but again has that nasty shield that keeps popping up, so hopefully that doesn't happen again. And in this case, it's a 1-for-1 hit. Now I'm actually going to do something right now. I'm going to use that reroll token that I have to hope a 1 in 6 chance will give me a double result to try and take out the skeleton while there's no shield present. So here we go. Hopefully this pans out. I only got a single damage so far on it. No, so this is only going to be a single damage, which I've already placed on here. So we're all good. I've taken the point of damage. I am 1 away from being knocked out. The skeleton's also 1 away from being taken out. It really all does come down to this roll. Either I push myself to my limit and I'm gone, or the skeleton is going to take the beating, or maybe both of us. Let's see how this goes. The skeleton unfortunately got the upper hand on me and lands the final hit to take me out. So as you'd expect from a survival game, if your stamina reaches 0, bad things happen. And of course, like what just happened now, if your health drops to 0, bad things happen. Now, when your health drops to 0, depending on if you're in a boss fight or in a standard fight out on the world map, you have to resolve things differently. So for the situation where I am in right now, which is not related to the boss, we are the active player. Our turn immediately ends. We don't draw an event card. Instead, we remove the next event card from the game without even looking at it. Essentially, time just passes by. You then place your gravestone token on a space where you died. You temporarily remove one of your equipment cards, if you have any, which I do, by placing it to the side of your player board. Any player on the space with a gravestone can pick up the dropped equipment by removing the gravestone token as a free action. The one piece of equipment I'm going to leave behind at my gravestone is going to be the flint axe. I don't need it anyway until I get further north to that resource area to gather wood, so it'll work out well to pass through it. Now, you might be wondering, don't you also drop all the resources that you have in this one space? Well, no. According to the prototype rules, you don't, but you have to remember time is being burned here because you're going to be spending more time to get back to where you died just to keep going. So that's a penalty in and of itself in terms of the time side of the equation, which is half of the things you have to manage while you're going through the game. The survival aspect and the time aspect. Now, if you want to increase the difficulty on yourself, you could choose to leave all your resources at the same spot the gravestone is as well. So in other words, your stone, your wood, all your other pieces that you have that way, and then have to come back and get them. That would just add another layer of difficulty onto the equation if you wish. But as of right now, we simply just go back to the house. Now, as our turn is at its end, and I haven't had a chance to talk about this, anytime you end your turn inside of the house, you typically gain the bonuses of furniture, things like beds and rugs and all that other stuff you've built. I haven't built any of that, but if I had it, I would not at this time after a death get to benefit from it. The final thing here to resolve is the worst penalty of them all, and this also ties into not only time wasted, but also how rough your character will start off their next turn, and that is you're only going to have a single point of stamina and a single point of health, meaning you're going to be spending some time cooking in your home to get benefits in order to get yourself replenished. Again, if you have the table, you'll be doing that faster as you're eating and consuming food, and of course, if you have the cauldron, you're taking the bottom section of the food card, so you're replenishing quicker, but you can see there's no need to add another layer of difficulty by dropping all your resources at this tombstone site unless you are a sucker for punishment and you want to add that house rule in there. So as I start my brand new turn, I'm looking at the resources that I currently have and checking out these right here. The first 3 are really important because at the end of every turn inside the house, you get benefits from them that can boost up your health and stamina faster, get your reroll tokens, all that good stuff. They're tied to certain things. The bed is health, the rug is going to be stamina, and this shrine here is going to be the reroll tokens. The problem is they all need fur, and ironically, we had thunderstorms going on, which were stopping me from getting any fur whatsoever, which I wanted to do, so we don't have any of the resources we need right now to make that happen. So we're going to have to do some cooking. Now, a cauldron, which would be a great thing to have, costs 2 bronze to pull together. If we could actually build a cauldron, we could take advantage of the bottom section of that prepared food I did much earlier in the video, and that would give us a much quicker boost to our health and our stamina. But unfortunately, we're just consuming food at a more simplistic and amateurish speed. So we've got 2 health here and 1 stamina to consume this for 1 action. So my health is back to 3, stamina is at 2, and I get a reroll token. Again, I can have a max of 2 of those. We'll definitely end up with that maximum because I'm going to be consuming some food here. I did another action to prepare some more food, or cook food, I should say, and we got ourselves some carrots, which is good for stamina. We'll now consume it for our 3rd action. So we're starting to get ourselves back up to where we need to be to get out there, but we need to pull an event card, so let's find out what happens. As we're sitting in our house cooking like crazy, heavy rain appears. It says keep this card in front of you until the start of your next turn. No event cards are drawn until then. While this card is active, players ending their turn outside lose stamina. Well, what a great time for another bout of rain. First action is going to be to cook. We got ourselves some boar meat. This one's really good for health. We'll go ahead and consume it. So first action was preparing the food, second action was consuming it. Our health is currently 1 away from the highest position. Stamina needs 2 more to get up there, and then I prepared a food for my third action here, which we'll consume later because I've run out of actions now. We're going to go to the event deck and see what we pull. This event is called Neck Ambush. If you're outside and if your tile is adjacent to water, a large territorial neck suddenly attacks you. It has stats like a specific enemy type based on that icon. If it is not defeated, it disappears into the water. If you defeat it, take no resource but reveal a food card if possible. Well, thank goodness this event does not affect us as we are currently inside, not outside. We are adjacent to water though. Going into the next turn, let's go ahead and consume this food for 1 action. And that's going to ensure that our stamina is bumped all the way to the top, which is nice. Our health is going to stay where it's at, which is pretty good. We don't get any more reroll tokens because we're already maxed out. My second action is going to be to craft new equipment. I'm going to choose to craft the crude bow. I think this is going to be more beneficial for us, allow us to use stamina to bump up our dice overall. This is going to cost 1 wood to do so, so we'll burn this away. Now, as a free action, we can dismantle equipment. I'm going to choose to dismantle my flint spear to get my rock back. Of course, I could focus on furniture if I wanted to, but instead I'm kind of upping my weapons. I'd love to be able to create something defensively, but I still don't have what I need there. I need some fur. So with my final action for the turn, I'm going to choose to move into a space where I can gather some fur. That's going to end off my turn and also put me in range distance from the skeleton to make an attack to hopefully take it out so it doesn't even have a chance to come after me. We're going to go ahead now and draw an event card and see what we get. We got off the top. Ooh, this is not good. The boss has shown up, intent on driving us off his land with his minions. We're going to place him on a tile adjacent to the house. For the next 3 turns, we don't draw event cards. Instead, we place a specific creature, which is this one right here. It's going to be, if I'm looking at the correct one, yes it is going to be Greylings. And if there's no Greylings left, then a different type of enemy will be coming out. And then it says as soon as there are 3 of them on the tile total, then he's going to send them into the house to raid it. So essentially this card is going to sit on top of the event deck, and for 3 consecutive turns, Greylings are going to appear. In other words, if I don't take out at least one of those Greylings, once there's 3 of them there, then the boss is going to send them in to raid my house. So even though it sounds horrific, it actually can be managed. The downside of this card coming out when it does is if you were really deep into exploring, let's say you were really far away, and you really needed to kind of trek back to take out at least one of those Greylings to prevent a raid, that is where this event card can be very painful. Let's now touch on raids inside the game. So first off, your house is right here. In the prototype, it looks pretty bare bones, and it is because I haven't put anything in it in terms of furniture. Once you build something, as I mentioned earlier in the video, you'll actually place a standee inside of here. And when raids occur, bad things are going to happen to the furniture that you've created in here. Also, there will be walls around the outside and a full roof to make it look like a real house, which is pretty cool. In the final version, you also have a space here for resources, which are stored. Now, if you're playing the easier version of the rules, your resources you gather as a person out in the wild immediately drop to your house. Of course, that can be really bad in the raid situation, or you can play where your resources that are on your character are kept on your character versus what's at your house until you decide to bring them back to your house, and that's how I'm currently playing. So how are raids resolved? Well, anytime creatures enter your house tile, it's considered a raid. If no conscious players are in the house when a raid happens, the creatures successfully carry out the raid. This includes situations where players are actually present defensively when the raid starts, but are then knocked out due to combat. So out of those 2 situations that can happen, either the creature is moving into the house and there's nobody there, so they're just having free reign to destroy furniture, or they move in and there's a combat that ensues and then creatures remain afterwards. If there are any afterwards, a successful raid is going to occur. You count how many creatures are currently in the house, you remove a piece of furniture per creature, in other words, they're destroying the furniture, and the players get to pick what's destroyed though, so you can choose what things you want to hold on to and what gets tossed. You do not get the construction resources back from the furniture being destroyed. If there are more raiding creatures than furniture, you discard event cards for the remaining ones. Then all creatures retreat into the wild and you remove them from the house. So an example of a raid would be if 3 creatures were moving in to raid the house and players, or my player, does not stop any of them. There's only 1 furniture item in the house. Let's say hypothetically, the creature will destroy the 1 furniture item, and then because there's no more remaining, the players discard 2 event cards. So again, just like losing all your health, it's going to burn a lot of time. It's going to hurt you in terms of your furniture for sure. Now, there's another thing that can happen to characters, and that is when you burn all of your stamina. When your stamina drops to 0, the biggest downside of having no stamina are the things you can't do anymore. You can never choose to spend stamina you don't have, so if you're forced to lose stamina, you instead have to lose the same amount of health. So that's another way that can tie back into your health depleting down to nothing. Again, as part of this current play in the very first scenario, stamina is not being used as much. You can see that based on the crude bow that I crafted, I could expend stamina to have more dice in an attack roll, for instance. And there's certain types of environments that will expend more stamina more rapidly. But once you burn out of stamina and you're still charging ahead and not replenishing it, that's where that health hit is really going to start hitting you. And again, that's going to burn time. All of this translates to survival, and you have to manage all these aspects. I find the whole survival system within this game to be very easy to comprehend, and it makes a lot of logical sense for the video game itself. Now, I'm in a space where I could potentially gather fur, but I want to be smart because, again, I could attract attention drawing monsters into the same space as me if I get an exclamation mark on the green die. So maybe instead I'll make that ranged attack against the skeleton and see if we can take it out. The good news now is I have the crude bow, and as I talked about just moments ago, I can expend stamina in order to get an extra die in this roll. So I'm rolling 2 yellow dice. I'm going to burn 1 stamina right now to be able to make this happen. And again, this is without any black dice in the equation because I'm shooting from range, increasing my chances of just wiping the skeleton out. So here we go. Apologies for that rogue die that fell out of my hand as I was explaining there, but regardless, we got way more than enough damage here on this skeleton from range to take it down. My second action is going to be to move. I want to move into the same space where my tombstone is, and it's a free action to interact with it. I'm happy to have my flint axe back in my hands. I've got 1 more action remaining, and I choose to move 1 more time. We're going to go into the space where the chest is. That'll do it for my 3 actions total, but the opening of a chest is considered a free action, so we'll do that right now by flipping over the chest. Now that's something I like to see. We got ourselves some bronze and gold. We move into an event phase. We do not draw from the top of the deck. Instead, one of the Greylings appears. Everything is okay for now, but we'll need to get back there to prevent a total of 3 Greylings in the future, because once they get in there, even if I have no furniture, they're going to burn away my event cards. As you'll see on my player dashboard for my ranger, I opened a chest, and when I did this, I can mark this small upgrade complete, which now provides me a passive. And that's going to allow me to take a free explore action going forward, and that's pretty good because we can start looking at tiles without burning major actions. Now I've skipped ahead a couple turns, and on those turns I was able to accomplish grabbing a couple things of wood, running back here to the house, taking some shots at some of the Greylings to stop the 3 necessary to pull a raid out. That ends the 3 turns worth total of that event card, so now we're back in the house. We don't have to worry about a raid because we were able to get back in time. At this point, we're going to move away from going round by round and start touching on the gameplay aspects we haven't seen so far. Now, one thing I do want to note around these green items I've crafted is there's a +1 in the bottom right-hand corner, which some of you might have noticed earlier, and you might be thinking as you roll the green die, you might gain an additional resource of that type as you roll the die. So in other words, you roll the die, you might get a hand symbol, so you add 1 to that, now you have 2. That could be the case, but there was nothing in the prototype rules to specify that exactly, so I kept it out for now. But in the final version, that may be how you play it, and if that is, I would have quite a bit more resources here. Again, as you look over the different furniture types you can pick up, these ones will really help you at end of turn, because every time your turn ends, you're going to get those benefits of increasing your health, increasing your stamina, getting reroll tokens back. This is going to allow you to kind of combo that along with the cooking to kind of give you a faster replenish in your home. So as an example, I could build the bed, the shrine, and also a fermenter to get those potions going. So the furniture that I've constructed goes inside my house. Any resources I want to keep at the house are placed in front, as I mentioned before. Let's now talk about Haldur. We mentioned this earlier on. There's 2 ways you can interact with Haldur. You can find him out in the wild and then go after his wares when you find him, or you can just summon him to your house when you're at your house. Now, to summon him, it'll cost a coin to get him to your house, but the thing is, you're going to want to make sure you have more coins so you can actually make a purchase once he shows up. Whether he shows up by paying him or you find him in the wild, you'll get his deck of cards and you draw the first 3 rare items. You can spend 3 coins to buy 1 of them. And if you're not happy with the first 3 that come out, you can choose to burn another action to reveal an additional 3 items to choose from. This allows you a nice handful of options to be able to choose between when you're spending 3 coins. You do not have to buy anything though if you don't want to. If you're simply just browsing, you can browse, but then anything you do not buy ends up going back inside of the deck. Now let's talk about summoning the Forsaken and getting into the final boss fight. For scenario number 1, we need to take down those 2 stags, find a specific tile, and then summon from that tile, which means flipping the Forsaken's altar to its arena side. Next, you place all your players on a single space of the arena. The main board is not used at all anymore. You place the boss on a space with the altar illustration on the arena. It's essentially the center space for the first 3 bosses, and you turn it to face the space with the players. There'll be a Forsaken Arena deck, which you're going to place on the creature board. So the creature deck you can see up there will be replaced by a specific deck for this boss battle. Then you'll find the boss info card. You'll know exactly which one because the actual artwork of the boss is on the opposite side. The active player then gets going and can do 2 different actions and can pick from any of the following options. You can move to a space not containing the boss within movement distance. You got to be aware of any restrictions or penalties in the area, of course. You can fight. You roll your attack and defensive dice as well as 3 black dice for the boss. Your defensive dice can only be used against regular damage results, not for any card effects. You resolve the dice in this specific order. The player attack dice damage the boss. Any black blank dice results move and rotate the boss. You then resolve blue defense results and then any black special results by drawing the top arena card and playing it. Discarding the card once its effect is done. Blue defense results cannot be used to negate any damage from arena cards specifically. The boss deals an additional damage to you if you're on a space directly in front of it, and +1 damage if the scenario is on the hard difficulty level. Keep in mind you can toss bombs, you can pick up gear, and also on that Odin power I talked about earlier, on the opposite side of it in the final version, as it's not here in the prototype version, but here's the Odin power. When you flip it over to the other side, which is something you can actually do during gameplay, you can get what's known as a personal stamina skill token. And once per boss battle, you can actually use that to throw against the boss. Each boss is detailed in the rulebook in terms of the dashboard they're using, and each dashboard is different for every boss. The deck of cards that come along with it, as I mentioned prior, is also specific to the boss. Of course, this one being an abnormally large stag with iron chains wrapped around his electrified red antlers, pretty terrifying. He's going to summon the power of lightning to strengthen his attacks, and his powerful antlers and kicks are going to hurt the players who get way too close to him. As you can see inside the prototype rules, each one of the bosses has their own specific information around the actual boss arena you'll be inside of, whether you're going up against the one we are, or potentially up against the Elder or any of these other various bosses. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up the game overview and gameplay video for Valheim, the board game, coming from Mood Publishing. This one landing on GameFound for October 1st. Again, the campaign link in the pinned comment and video description. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this one in its preview prototype form, and more information will be coming as part of the campaign. Thanks again for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.